The morning began like any other at the airbase. The runway stretched into the horizon, disappearing into a thin mist. The air was cool and the sound of engines warming up echoed between the hangars. Everyone moved with purpose, mechanics checking panels, pilots walking briskly with flight helmets under their arms, officers calling out checklists. Among them was a new face, walking a little slower, taking in every detail. She had been transferred from another unit, one known for reconnaissance rather than combat. Her transfer papers had arrived quietly, but her arrival didn't go unnoticed. The base she'd come to wasn't ordinary. It was home to one of the most respected fighter squadrons in the Air Force. Every pilot there had earned their place through grit, experience, and precision. She stood in front of the jet assigned to her, feeling the dry wind brush across her face. The aircraft gleamed under the pale sun, but what caught her attention wasn't the shine. It was the seat number marked just under the canopy, Uro 7. She had heard the stories about that number even before she arrived. Pilots at other bases whispered about it. Mechanics spoke of it in low tones. Seat 07 belonged to a pilot who had once been the pride of the squadron. He had led missions that became legends among younger flyers. But 2 years ago, during a high-risk operation over the mountains, he hadn't returned. The wreckage was never found, and his call sign, Falcon 7, was retired in silence. Now, the same seat, the same call sign, had been reassigned. As she placed her hand on the cold metal, she felt a strange mix of honor and unease. She wasn't superstitious, but something about taking that seat felt heavy. The jet felt alive, like it still carried the memory of the one who once sat there. The first day was mostly introductions and briefings. The commanding officer kept it formal, his words brief but sharp. He didn't look impressed or disappointed, just curious. "You've flown recon before," he said, flipping through her file. "Good record. But this isn't recon. Here we fly into the storm, not around it." She nodded, meeting his eyes without speaking. She had been told about his strictness. He was known for valuing silence over promises. When she entered the squadron room later that morning, the air felt different. Conversations paused for a moment before resuming. Some of the pilots offered polite smiles, others just nodded. There was no open hostility, just quiet observation. It was the kind of silence that tested a newcomer more than words ever could. She found her locker at the end of the row. On its door was a faded sticker, the same kind the former pilot had placed there years ago. She traced the edges of it gently, realizing no one had touched it since. That afternoon, during her orientation flight, she watched as the desert landscape rolled beneath them. The sky was calm, the light sharp and golden. Her instructor's voice came through the headset. "You're smooth with the controls," he said. "But up here, smooth doesn't always mean safe. You'll learn that soon." She smiled faintly, not responding. He didn't mean it harshly. It was just the kind of truth every pilot at that level needed to hear. When they landed, the ground crew gathered as usual, checking the landing gear, removing panels. She climbed down from the cockpit, her legs slightly stiff, and handed her helmet to a technician. The man looked at her for a moment and said quietly, "It's good to see that jet in the air again." She didn't know what to say, so she just nodded. The technician had worked on that same aircraft for years, long before she ever dreamed of flying it. To him, it wasn't just another machine, it was a piece of history. That night, the barracks were quiet. She sat by the window of her small room, looking out at the hangar lights. Jets rested in perfect rows, their silhouettes outlined by yellow glow. She thought about the seat number again. 07 to everyone else, it was just a number. To her, it was beginning to feel like a silent conversation between the past and the present. Days turned into weeks. Every morning started before sunrise, with flight prep, briefings, and endless drills. The squadron's pace was relentless. They practiced dogfights, formation changes, emergency protocols. Each flight ended with detailed debriefs where mistakes were discussed bluntly, sometimes harshly. She stayed quiet through most of them. She listened, learned, and made sure her name didn't come up for the wrong reasons. Slowly, she began to earn small nods from a few of the pilots. One of them, a seasoned flyer known for his blunt humor, said after a mission, "You don't flinch easily." That's good. It wasn't much, but it was something. Still, she could feel the invisible pressure. Every time she walked past the older pilots, she caught their glances toward her flight suit, the patch on her arm, the number stitched below it. She wasn't just flying her missions, she was flying against a memory. One afternoon, the weather turned rough. Storm clouds rolled in faster than expected. The squadron was ordered to stay grounded, but she stayed in the hangar watching the rain hit the tarmac. The sound was sharp and rhythmic like a drum beat. The technician from earlier approached her, wiping grease from his hands. "You know," he said, "that seat you're in, it wasn't given lightly. The captain had a choice to retire that jet. But he didn't. Said it should fly again when someone worthy showed up." She looked at him, surprised. "And he thought I was that person?" The technician shrugged. "He thought someone had to be brave enough to take it. That counts for something." She smiled faintly, unsure how to respond. Later that week, she had her first solo evaluation flight in that jet. The sky was clear, the air thin and cold. As she lifted off, the engines roared beneath her, smooth and steady. The city disappeared behind her, replaced by endless desert. She leveled off at 20,000 feet, her hands steady on the controls. The silence of the cockpit surrounded her. Only the soft hum of the systems filled her ears. She looked down at the control panel and caught her reflection in the glass. For a second, she imagined what the former pilot must have seen. The same view, the same light cutting across the horizon. It felt like flying beside a ghost, but instead of fear, she felt calm. She spoke softly into the mic, though no one was listening. "Seat 07 back in the air," she said. When she returned, the flight data showed near-perfect precision. Her landings were clean, her turns tight. Even the commanding officer, known for rarely complimenting anyone, nodded slightly. "Not bad," he said. "Keep it consistent." That night, she didn't go back to her room right away. She walked out to the airstrip and stood near her jet. The wind was cool, carrying the faint smell of fuel and metal. Above her, stars stretched across the black sky. She thought about how many pilots had stood in that exact spot before her, wondering if they were good enough, brave enough, ready enough. She realized that maybe no one ever truly feels ready. Maybe you just show up, take your seat, and do the best you can. Over time, the quiet respect from others grew. No one said it aloud, but she could feel the shift. The way people looked at her changed. Less doubt, more acknowledgement. She still didn't speak much in the break room, still preferred sitting by herself, but she was no longer invisible. The aircraft she flew had its own presence in the hangar. When others walked by, they often paused for a second, just looking. Some said they still felt the old pilot spirit there. She never denied it. Sometimes, when she placed her helmet on the seat before flight, she would whisper, "Let's make this one count." It wasn't superstition. It was respect. Weeks later, the squadron prepared for a major joint exercise. It was her first time flying alongside international pilots, and everyone was tense. Her name appeared on the mission list right next to her call sign. Some of the others exchanged glances but said nothing. She saw one of them grin slightly and say, "Falcon 7 is flying again." That single sentence stayed with her. The next morning, before dawn, she suited up and walked to her jet. The air was still, the sky painted in faint blue and gray. As she climbed into the cockpit, she ran her fingers across the small plaque beneath the canopy, one that still bore the old call sign. She didn't erase it. She didn't need to. She just added one small thing next to it, her initials. Nothing more. No words, no ceremony. When the engine started and the ground shook, the technician from before gave her a thumbs up. She nodded back. As the jet lifted from the runway and rose into the glowing horizon, the base below watched quietly. There was something poetic in that moment. The same seat, the same machine, flying again after years of silence. And even though she didn't know it yet, that flight would mark the beginning of a story the entire squadron would remember for years to come. Because sometimes, respect isn't claimed. It's earned, one seat at a time. The first light of morning touched the airbase as the engines began to warm up again. She walked across the tarmac in silence, the cold biting at her face. Each step echoed faintly, mixing with the steady hum of jet turbines. She had started to blend in now, no longer the newcomer everyone whispered about, but still not fully one of them. Routine had become her rhythm. Wake before sunrise, suit up, review the mission, fly, debrief, repeat. But the unspoken challenge hung in the air every day, the test of whether she truly belonged in Seat 07. The squadron she had joined was known for its precision. Mistakes weren't tolerated, excuses even less. Every pilot there carried a certain pride, a belief that their seat was earned, not given. That made her presence a quiet question mark in their world. Some had accepted her with cautious respect. Others still waited for her to stumble. On that particular morning, they were preparing for a tactical formation drill, 4 jets flying close, practicing turns and climbs that demanded absolute trust. The sky was cloudless, the air steady, perfect conditions. As she walked to her aircraft, the same technician gave her a brief nod. It had become their wordless routine, his nod before takeoff, her small nod in return. It felt like a good luck ritual, even if neither of them said it out loud. Inside the cockpit, she ran her hands over the controls, adjusting switches, checking every detail twice. When her radio crackled with the captain's voice, she answered clearly, steady as always. The team lined up on the runway. Engines roared, heat shimmered, and in perfect timing they lifted off, 4 dark silhouettes slicing through the pale blue morning. High above the ground, the world looked peaceful. The landscape stretched for miles, rivers like silver threads, roads cutting through open land. But inside her helmet, her focus was razor sharp. Every movement had to be precise. A few degrees off and formation would break. They practiced for nearly an hour. Tight turns, quick ascents, low dips over the desert. Sweat rolled down her neck under the flight suit. Her hands never left the stick, her eyes never left the lead jet. The rhythm between them became like a silent conversation. No words, just movement and trust. When they finally returned, landing one by one, the ground crew greeted them with quiet efficiency. During the debrief, the captain scanned through the data. Formation 3 held position, he said, looking briefly toward her. No deviation on turns. Good work, that was it. Just a few words. But in that room, those words meant more than any applause. She gave a short nod, keeping her face calm, but inside, she felt something shift. A small but certain piece of respect had been earned. After the meeting, she stayed behind reviewing flight footage alone. Watching herself fly was like seeing another person, controlled, focused, almost detached. She paused at the moment where they cut through the low clouds, their formation perfectly symmetrical. It was beautiful in its own quiet way. A voice behind her made her turn. "You fly steady," one of the senior pilots said, standing at the door. "Most new ones overcorrect when they get nervous." "I guess I just trust the training," she replied simply. He nodded, stepping closer. "That seat you're in, it belonged to someone who never overcorrected either." He had the same calm look when he flew. It's strange seeing it again. She didn't know what to say to that. There was a kind of softness in his tone that wasn't there before. It wasn't pity. It was something closer to understanding. After that day, things began to shift quietly. The silences in the ready room weren't as heavy. The jokes thrown across the table sometimes included her now. A few even began asking for her input during planning sessions. She didn't speak much, but when she did, she spoke clearly and kept it practical. Still, she knew it wasn't over. Respect in a squadron like this wasn't built in weeks. It was earned over time, flight by flight. One evening, after a long training session, the captain gathered everyone in the hangar. "Tomorrow," he said, "we fly the mountain drill. Real terrain, limited visibility, close coordination. Don't treat it like practice, treat it like a mission." The mountain drill was one of the hardest. It simulated combat conditions, fast flying through narrow valleys, constant communication, unpredictable winds. A mistake could mean clipping a ridge or losing radar contact. That night she barely slept. She lay awake listening to the faint hum of the base generators outside, the occasional sound of a jet engine testing in the distance. Her mind ran through the route, waypoints, altitudes, turns. She had memorized it all. But something about the terrain reminded her of the mission the old pilot never returned from. At dawn, she stood by her aircraft, helmet tucked under her arm. The technician looked at her longer than usual. "Winds shifting near the mountains today," he said quietly. "Be careful." "I will," she replied, giving a small smile. Once airborne, the landscape below changed from open desert to rising peaks. The air grew thinner, the sky brighter. The group flew in formation at low altitude, weaving through ridges and valleys. Radio chatter was brief, sharp, focused. When they reached the narrowest part of the route, turbulence hit. The jet jolted slightly, but she adjusted instantly. Her breathing stayed calm, eyes fixed on her instruments and the horizon ahead. The captain's voice came over the comms. "Stay tight, everyone." Visibility dropping. A sudden gust pushed the formation slightly apart. Her jet wavered for a split second, then she corrected smoothly, holding her line. Her training took over completely, no panic, no hesitation. She guided her aircraft with pure instinct, trusting the feel of the air around her. By the time they emerged from the mountain pass, the sky opened up again, clear, endless blue. The rest of the squadron fell back into formation. The radio was silent for a moment. Then the captain spoke, his tone steady but softer than usual. "Good recovery, Seven, smooth hands." She smiled behind her mask. It was the first time he'd called her by that number. 7, without hesitation. For everyone else, it might have sounded ordinary. For her, it meant everything. When they landed, she climbed out of the cockpit, her arms still tense from the flight. The others were already joking, patting each other's shoulders. One of them turned to her and said, "Didn't think you'd hold that line through the gust." "Nice work. Just following the leader," she said with a small grin. The technician met her by the wing, shaking his head slightly. "You're making that jet look alive again," he said. She ran her hand along the side of the plane. Maybe it just needed someone to remind it how to breathe. That night the hangar lights were dim and most of the crew had gone. She stayed behind again, sitting on a crate with her helmet beside her. The smell of oil and metal filled the air. For a while she just watched the shadow of her jet stretching across the concrete floor. It felt like sitting beside an old friend. She thought about everything that had happened in just a few weeks. The stares, the silence, the unspoken tests. None of it was easy, but every flight made her feel stronger, more certain that she belonged there. The captain walked in quietly, stopping beside her jet. "You're settling in," he said, looking up at the aircraft. "I'm trying," she answered. He gave a short nod. "You did well today. That crosswind through the pass would have shaken most pilots. You didn't flinch." "Guess the seat helps," she said softly, half joking. He looked at her then, his expression unreadable. "The seat doesn't fly the jet," he said. "The person does. But maybe the seat chooses who gets to fly it." She didn't know what to say to that. He started walking away, then paused. "Get some rest. Tomorrow's another long day." After he left, she looked at the jet again. The faint scratches on the metal caught the light. They were like scars, proof that it had seen things, survived things. She reached out and rested her hand against it, whispering, "We're doing okay, right?" The hangar was silent, but in that silence she felt a kind of answer, something that didn't need words. Outside, the wind blew softly across the runway. In the distance, lights from the control tower blinked steadily. The world seemed peaceful for a moment, but she knew peace was temporary in their line of work. There was always another mission, another test, another chance to prove yourself. She took one last look at the aircraft before turning away. The old stories about the seat still lingered, but they didn't haunt her anymore. Instead, they pushed her forward. She wasn't replacing anyone. She was continuing something bigger than herself. By the time she reached her quarters, the base was quiet. She set her helmet down on the table and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at it for a long time. The same helmet that had seen storms, wind, sunlight, and doubt. She smiled faintly. Tomorrow she would fly again. And this time no one would wonder if she belonged in that seat. They already knew. Days at the airbase had a rhythm now, a rhythm she had learned to move with. The sound of engines, the scent of fuel, the short, sharp calls over the radio, they were no longer noise. They were part of her heartbeat. Every flight, every drill, every small nod from a senior pilot reminded her that she wasn't just filling a seat anymore. She was earning her place in it. But even when things felt calm, the skies had a way of testing every pilot at the moment they least expected it. The morning it happened began quietly. The wind was soft, the sun climbing over the hangars in slow gold light. The squadron was scheduled for routine formation work and communications testing. Nothing unusual, just another day in the air. She walked toward her jet with that familiar mix of focus and calm. The same technician stood by, holding a checklist and giving her a quick nod. "Winds are shifting from the east," he said. "Smooth up high, choppy below 5,000. She smiled faintly. "I'll stay above it." As she climbed into the cockpit, she could hear the distant roar of other jets taking off. The radio buzzed with short bursts of chatter. Once her systems were green, she pushed the throttle gently forward, feeling the jet come alive beneath her. The power, the vibration, the smell, it was something she would never stop feeling in her chest. When they took to the sky, everything seemed normal. The formation was tight, the communications clear. The captain led from the front, his voice steady. The air shimmered around them, sunlight flashing off wings like blades of silver. For the first 20 minutes, everything was routine: climbs, turns, formation shifts. She held her position perfectly, never drifting. Then, as they leveled out over the open desert, the radio crackled with a call from command. Eagle formation. Reroute to grid 247. A recon aircraft is reporting signal interference near Sector Charlie. Check and confirm. The captain acknowledged, then switched channels. We've got a live check. Adjust heading 180. Maintain current altitude. The sudden change didn't seem serious. Signal interference happened often. But as they turned south, she felt the air shift. Clouds thickened on the horizon, pale gray at first, then darkening. It was strange, weather like that wasn't on the morning brief. Within minutes, static began to creep into their radios. The smooth chatter turned patchy. She could hear the captain's voice breaking slightly. Formation, tighten up. Stay within visual. The others responded, but one voice cut in sharply. A junior pilot from another section. Sir, we've got something on radar. A small aircraft, low altitude, no transponder. There was a pause. Then the captain said, copy that. Maintain eyes. Let's check it out. They dropped altitude slowly, the clouds closing around them. Visibility dropped to almost nothing. The sun vanished behind a gray curtain. All she could see were flashes of light from the jets around her. Her breathing slowed. Every sense sharpened, then came the unexpected. A distress signal cut through the static. Short, broken, barely readable. A voice struggling through interference. Engine failure. Losing altitude. It wasn't one of theirs. Her eyes darted across her radar screen. A faint blip appeared just ahead, dropping fast. The captain's voice came through, now louder, more urgent. We've got a downed recon flight. All units hold formation. 7, you're closest. Take visual. She didn't hesitate. She pushed her throttle, cutting through the mist. The airframe shook slightly as she descended. The clouds opened for just a second and she saw it. A small reconnaissance jet spiraling down, smoke trailing from one wing. Her heart kicked hard in her chest. She keyed her radio. Visual confirmed. 1 recon, engine fire, losing altitude fast. The captain replied instantly. Stay with them, 7. Talk them through it if you can. We're looping around. She switched frequencies and tried to reach the other jet. Recon 1, this is Falcon 7, you're on fire. Eject if you can hear me. Static answered first, then a weak voice. Trying. Systems not responding. Controls locked. Her pulse pounded. She dropped lower, matching speed as much as she could. Listen to me, she said firmly. You need to level your wings. Pull back gently, don't fight it. You've got altitude. Use it, no answer. The burning jet tilted again, rolling dangerously. Her instincts screamed at her to pull away, but she didn't. She stayed close, every nerve focused. Come on, she whispered under her breath. Hold it, just hold it. The aircraft below shuddered violently, then straightened slightly. The voice returned, faint but clearer. Leveling. Controls back. Fire spreading. You're doing fine, she said quickly. You're still flying. Head 20 degrees east, there's a flat strip about 6 miles out. You can make it. Smoke filled her view. The smell of burning fuel reached even her through the mask. She followed, guiding him through every move. The voice grew weaker but calmer, following her instructions. When the ground came into view, she saw a dry, open patch of land. Rough, but survivable. Cut power now, she said. Glide it in. You've got this. Seconds stretched like hours. The small jet touched down, bounced, then skidded across the sand before stopping in a cloud of dust and smoke. She pulled up hard, circling above the scene. Her voice trembled slightly as she spoke. Recon 1 is down. Pilot ejected late but alive. Coordinates marked. The captain's voice came back through static. Copy that, 7, hold position. Recovery team en route. Only then did she realize how tight her grip had been on the controls. Her hands were trembling. She took a slow breath, eyes fixed on the spot below. When they returned to base, the mood was different. No one said much. The debrief was short. The recon pilot had been rescued, shaken but safe. The captain looked at her across the room, his expression unreadable. After the meeting, he approached her quietly. You broke formation without orders, he said. She met his gaze. Yes, sir. You also saved a pilot's life. She said nothing, unsure how to respond. He nodded once. Next time, remember both. It wasn't a reprimand. It wasn't praise either. It was something in between, a balance that every pilot learned to carry. Later that night, she sat in the hangar again, staring at her jet. The light from the ceiling reflected off its wings, still marked from the long flight. The technician walked up, wiping his hands on a rag. "Heard you brought one back today," he said softly. She nodded. "He got lucky." The man gave a small smile. Maybe luck had helped, she didn't reply. She just looked at the jet again. The seat number 07 seemed to glow faintly under the lights. For a moment, she imagined the old pilot watching, maybe even proud. She didn't know if he'd done something similar once, or if his call sign had meant what it now meant to her, but in her heart, she hoped he would have approved. The next day, word spread quietly through the base. No one said it loudly, but everyone knew who had guided that damaged aircraft down. Some stopped her in the hallway, offering small nods. Others clapped her on the shoulder in passing. Respect wasn't spoken out loud in places like this. It was shown in silence. At the morning briefing, the captain looked around the room before speaking. "Yesterday was a reminder," he said evenly. "Out there, we don't get second chances. We trust skill, not luck. We watch each other's backs. That's how this squadron stays alive." Then his eyes settled on her briefly. "Falcon 7 showed that yesterday. It was just one line, but it carried weight." A few pilots glanced at her, some with quiet smiles. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. That evening, as the sun set behind the runway, she walked out to the edge of the airstrip. The sky burned orange and purple, the sound of jets fading in the distance. She thought about the voice she'd heard in the storm, the panic, the fear, the relief. She thought about how easily everything could have gone the other way. Flying wasn't just about skill. It was about instinct, courage, and something deeper. Respect. Not just for the people around you, but for the sky itself. When she looked back at the hangar, her aircraft was there, its silhouette framed against the fading light. The same seat that had once belonged to a lost pilot now carried a new story. A continuation, not a replacement, she whispered quietly. One seat, one call sign, and smiled faintly. Still earning it. Then she turned and walked back, the runway lights blinking behind her like stars waiting to be chased. The base had changed for her after that mission. The way people looked at her, the way they spoke to her, it was all quieter but full of something new. Respect didn't come in applause or handshakes here. It came in the unspoken moments. A simple nod from the captain, a pat on the shoulder from a mechanic, a quiet smile from another pilot. That was how they showed it. For weeks after the rescue, her schedule stayed full. Flights, drills, and maintenance checks filled her days. But something in the air felt different now. She had proved her place in the sky, yet she still carried the weight of the seat she occupied. Every time she sat in it, she felt its story, the one that came before her and the one she was still writing. One evening, just after sunset, she was in the hangar going through post-flight checks when the captain walked in. The hangar was nearly empty except for a few mechanics finishing their work. He stopped beside her jet, looking at it for a moment before speaking. "Command wants us on standby," he said. "There's been some movement near the border. Could just be a drill, but we're the closest unit." She nodded, wiping her hands on a cloth. "Understood." He studied her quietly for a moment. "You've been flying hard these past few weeks. You holding up?" "I'm fine," she said. "Fine's not an answer," he replied calmly. "You sleeping?" "Mostly," he smirked slightly. "Mostly doesn't count either." She looked at the jet and shrugged. "It helps me think. The noise, the light, the smell of the hangar, it feels steady." He nodded slowly as if he understood more than he said. "Keep your head clear. If we get called in, it could be rough weather, maybe night operations." She met his eyes. "I'll be ready." He didn't question it. He just gave a short nod and walked off. The next day was quiet, the kind of silence that made people restless. Pilots hung around the ready room, half watching the news feed, half pretending not to care. The air outside felt heavier than usual. Late in the afternoon, the order came through. A small convoy in a remote valley had lost communication during a storm. Satellite images showed no enemy presence, but the area was unpredictable. The mission was simple: fly in pairs, scout, and confirm visual contact. Her name appeared on the board again: Falcon 7, paired with the captain. As the sun dipped behind the hills, she suited up. The sky was turning violet, the first stars starting to appear. The technician walked over with the flight checklist, his usual quiet calm replaced with a faint edge of concern. "Storm's growing faster than forecast," he said. "You'll be flying blind if it thickens." She checked her oxygen seal. "Then I'll keep my eyes on the instruments." He hesitated, then said softly, "Be careful out there. Seat 07 doesn't like quiet skies." She looked at him for a second and smiled. Maybe it just likes to be useful. The engine started with a deep, low growl. The lights of the runway shimmered through thin rain as they taxied out. She followed the captain's jet down the line, the air vibrating with controlled power. Then the signal came. 2 jets lifting off together into the darkening sky. Above the base, the clouds swallowed them quickly. Lightning flashed far ahead, painting the horizon white for an instant before fading. She adjusted her altitude, keeping steady. The captain's voice came through her headset, clear but faint under the static. "Stay close. Keep your radar tight." "Copy that." For the next hour, they flew through thick turbulence, navigating between cloud layers. Every flash of lightning reminded her of how small they were in the sky. Wind buffeted the aircraft, and raindrops streaked across the canopy like tiny sparks. When they finally reached the valley, visibility dropped again. The terrain below was rugged, cut by cliffs and narrow paths. She could barely see the ground through the mist, only faint outlines of ridges and rivers. "Anything?" the captain asked. She scanned her instruments. "Radar's showing movement, but it's faint. Could be static interference. Circle once. Keep your eyes open." They looped around slowly, the engine steady but strained in the heavy air. Then out of the corner of her eye she saw a flicker of light far below, a small signal like a flare. "I've got visual," she said. "Grid 321 flashing light. Copy that, I see it. Could be the convoy's distress beacon." They descended carefully, keeping formation tight. The storm pressed harder, wind tossing the aircraft around. Rain hammered the canopy, thunder rolling like distant drums. Her hand stayed firm on the controls. As they reached lower altitude, her radar suddenly blinked, a warning tone she hadn't heard before. "I've got interference again," she said. "It's spiking." The captain's voice came through, slightly strained. "Copy, maintain course." Could just be the terrain. But it wasn't the terrain. The interference grew stronger, the radar flashing erratically. Then in the next instant everything went dark, the radar, the lights, the screens. "Captain, I've lost visual systems offline." Static filled her headset. No reply, she felt her chest tighten. The storm outside roared, rain blurring everything. The horizon vanished. For a split second, disorientation hit. No sky, no ground, just gray chaos. Then training kicked in. She shut her eyes for a second, steadying her breathing, then reopened them. Manual controls only. She leveled the stick slowly, feeling the aircraft respond through the vibrations in the seat. "Come on, stay with me," she whispered. Through the static, she heard a faint voice, broken, distant, but familiar. "The captain. 7, pull east. Repeat east. You're too low." She adjusted instantly, banking left. A flash of lightning revealed the rocky slope below, far too close. Her pulse raced. She pulled up sharply, the jet straining against the wind. The alarms screamed, red lights flickering across the panel. The world tilted, then steadied. When the storm began to ease, she finally broke through the top of the clouds. The sudden stillness was almost shocking. The moonlight washed over her canopy, soft and silver. For a moment she just breathed, her heartbeat still wild. The radio cleared again. 7, report. "Back on course," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "Systems recovering." "Good," the captain replied. "Convoy found. They're safe. Let's head home." The flight back was quiet. The clouds parted slowly, revealing the faint glow of the base lights far away. The storm still rumbled behind them, but the air was calm now. When they landed, the ground crew rushed forward, checking the jets for damage. She climbed down, her legs weak but steady. The technician was there, looking both relieved and worried. "You cut it close," he said quietly. She gave a small, tired smile. "Close enough to come back." The captain approached as the others worked. He stood in front of her jet, hands on his hips, eyes scanning the wing where lightning had scorched the paint. Then he looked at her. "You lost everything up there and still came out clean," he said. "Not many can do that." "Got lucky again," she replied softly. He shook his head. "Luck doesn't hold a jet steady through a blackout. Skill does." There was a pause, the kind of pause that felt heavy with meaning. Then he said quietly, The one who flew this before you would have liked you? Her throat tightened. You knew him well? Better than most, he said. He was one of the best, but even the best have to trust the sky sometimes. She looked up at the jet, still dripping with rain, its silver surface scarred from the storm. I think I understand that now, she said. He gave a faint smile. You've earned more than just the seat, Seven. You've earned the call sign. That night, the hangar was silent except for the distant hum of machines. She stood beside the jet long after everyone left, running her hand along its side. The seat, the call sign, the legacy, they no longer felt like someone else's story. They felt shared. The lightning scars on the metal caught the dim light, looking almost like marks of pride. She sat down on a small crate, staring up at the aircraft, and whispered, We made it again. In that quiet space, with only the faint echo of rain outside, she felt something she hadn't before. Peace. Not relief, not exhaustion, but peace. The kind that came from knowing she had faced the storm and returned stronger. The next morning, when the sun rose and touched the wet runway, her aircraft stood out among the others. The scorch marks hadn't been cleaned yet, but no one minded. They were proof of what she'd done. As the day began, the captain passed her on the tarmac. He didn't say a word, just nodded. She nodded back, no ceremony, no speech, just quiet, steady respect, the kind that lasts.